Good evening. It's time to bring Macomb Township Planning Commission meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, November 19th. Please stand for the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shudo.
Here.
Mr. Provenzano.
Here.
Mr. Oliver.
Here.
Mr. Tuckfield is present. Mr. Chairman, I think we have 3 absences tonight. Mr. Kuzminski, Mr. Bentley, and Mr. Hardy.
Okay.
Not sure if we're...
Can we note that and excuse them from the roll calls?
I'll make a motion we exclude all 3 from roll call votes.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Shudo, support by Mr. Provenzano. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
And Mr. Chairman, just for the record, we're noting all 3 of those as excused?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, approval of the minutes.
No,
Previous meeting minutes.
no additions, deletions, or correction. I make a motion we accept the minutes as read.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Shudo, support by Mr. Provenzano. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, if there's nothing further, I move that we accept them.
Motion by Mr. Provenzano to approve the agenda.
Support.
Support by Mr. Shudo. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion passes. Item 6, new business, public hearings. 6A, rezoning request, vacant 22 Mile Road, community facility, CF to residential, urban 1 family, R1, permanent parcel. 08-22-400-041, located on north side of 22 Mile Road, west of Card Road, Section 22, Macomb Township petitioner. Mr. Maher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This request, the township is actually the petitioner for the rezoning and the current owner of the property. Just for a little historical background, the property at one time was approved, this piece as well as the piece just to the north of it with the residential subdivision. Church bought the southern half of the property, or actually bought the entire property, at which point we made a deal with the church to rezone it CF to protect the township in light of the fact that they weren't going to use the northern half. They were going to allow residential development on the north half, but they didn't want to put a stub in going to the southern property to provide for adequate emergency service access. That being said, the church bought it, kept it for a year or so, and then decided it wasn't going to work for them. So they turned around, we're going to sell it for residential purposes. The township then bought it, negotiated a stub to come into the property, and it's been sitting in the township's hands since that point. So we're basically asking that the property, which was R1, that we rezoned to CF, be rezoned back to R1, which is consistent with the master plan.
Okay. Commissioners? Questions? I got one, Mr. Maher. Our plans are to continue with London Bridge Road. Once that, as it moves forward, this property, London Bridge will continue out to 22 Mile Road?
That's correct.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, I had a question. Mr. Van Tiffel, did you? I wasn't sure if you were about to say something.
Nope.
I cut you off. Okay, very good. And this would be to Mr. Maher. You indicated that the rezoning to CF was to protect our interests.
That's correct.
Could you expand on that? What about rezoning it helps the stub street?
Well, the concept was if we limited it to a church type or institutional type use, we wouldn't need a stub street to carry out to 22 at that point in time. we wouldn't have been able to facilitate a public through route. State law doesn't mandate that, whereas with residential development, the state law does allow us to mandate a street connection.
So the protection was going CF as opposed to commercial or something of that nature.
Exactly, and if we had left it residential, the southern portion at that point in time, and the church sold, the fear was we'd end up with a 1,200-foot cul-de-sac that dead-ended.
Dead ended right adjacent to that London Bridge Road.
Correct.
I had another question. I know that this went before ZBA at least once, although I didn't pull up my records. How does it work with variances when a parcel changes zoning?
I guess I would have, yeah, the variance generally runs with the property. I guess, there could be an argument some of the conditions have changed, but I don't honestly remember what the variances were on that property. Do you, Jim?
I want to say it had to do with the parcel split.
I
when
I
they
don't
split the
remember.
back
I just
off.
remember we saw it at ZBA.
Yeah, there are a number of consent judgments that ran with this property as well as the ZBA action. But I think it had to do with the parcel split. I know there was at one point concern about stubbing to the west into that big piece where that large home has been built.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Just I don't remember.
The issue with the back end of the property, the township was, when the church was going to be built, the township was going to mandate that the two stub streets coming out of the subdivision to the north and to the east be connected, which meant that they had to sell that off for development. That piece did not have enough public road frontage to
Not
create a
public road
parcel.
to split it. So
Yes.
we had okay. I remember. That,
So,
yes.
yes, so that was that variance, and then the consent judgment was modified to eliminate that parcel.
Yeah, I think there was another variance request that they had, and that got folded into the consent judgment at
Yes.
that point because
Yep.
we didn't have the grounds to grant it. Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are all my questions.
Okay, anyone else? All right, at this time I'll bring it to public. Ma'am, we need your name and address.
My name is Kimberly Drescher Tenascu, and I live at 505 Murray Drive,
Get that?
Macomb, Michigan, 48045. And I have a couple questions about that piece of property. Who proposed buying it when the township purchased the property, and when did they purchase it?
I'm not gonna answer, we're gonna take all the questions and we'll get them answered.
My next question would be, what communication about buying it was sent to the board before the purchase, and how was it sent? Was it sent by email? My next question is, what was the planned use when they purchased that property?
Hold on one second. Jason, you okay?
Okay. And was the planned usage, when were they planning on using the property and for what purpose? My next question is, was or are the township plans for park use or for future land acquisition set forth somewhere before you just purchased property? My fifth question is, who valued the property when you purchased it? What was the purchase price? And what is the value now as residential? My next question is, what other property has been bought at that fast of a speed without being part of a planned search over time for a specific purpose for the township?
Anyone, are you done, ma'am?
I am.
Okay. I'm gonna take anyone else's, questions. Sir?
Leslie Gross, 52777 Sable, Macomb Township. I bought the first split of that property that ended up being
Sir,
for a
I need you to get into that mic a little bit.
Okay. I purchased almost 5 acres from the church prior to this piece here you're talking about, approximately a little over 15 acres, okay? We went through a lot of stuff. My partner was Frank Mancini, well-known in the area, developer, builder, architect, and we went through a lot of things, okay? We had a plan for that subdivision, we'll call it West, that included 11 lots, all of a sudden, we also had line of credit. All of a sudden, a guy named Mr. Bucci got involved, and all of a sudden, he had another plan for that piece, that 15 acres. We had to go along with it at the time. We had to settle for some other lots that were garbage, okay, when we had a perfectly planned Court Street, okay? But there are a lot of people involved with that at the time. You know the time going back. I purchased that property in July 2012, and it was a nightmare, okay? I remember Jimmy Van Tiffen and Mrs. Dunn and all of them, and there was always a referral, go see Mr. Bucci, okay? So, there was a lot of stuff in purchasing that property. They wanted that property, that 15 acres, to stay with the church. It took a long time to grant 5 acres. They had their own attorney, and it was Ascension Lutheran Church that ended up buying a building on the other end of 23 Mile Road. You know, I know what I'm talking about, okay? So, I'd like to do is buying the property. All of a sudden, the township buys this piece of property right after we had to put this stub street in, okay, and all the things that went with that. So it's kind of interesting what's going on. You know, hopefully we got another clean record, because we all know what went on a while ago, okay? And I'm not trying to be a bad person, but we all know what went on. So these questions Frank wants to see, as well as me, as to who's buying this property. We know the township bought the property, you know, out of the blue. And we go, well, what are they going to use it for? You know, it needed a lot of dirt there to build on. We knew that. We passed on it, tell you the truth. From the church, they came to me first. So if you could get these answers, this gal works with us. She does a great job. And Frank could be here when we start this meeting. We know it was going to be just one item on the agenda. So that's why we had to take care of it the way we did, okay? So please take care of this. We need answers. Who's buying it? Township bought it at one time. We know that. And I hope that what's going on isn't something that was forced on us that shouldn't have been. We had an approved project, line of credit, the whole deal, and it took a lot of stuff to just finally build them up, and we'll deal with it later on, you know? So, thank you for your
Okay.
time, okay?
Thank you. Anyone else on this item? Being done, I'll close the public portion, and I'll defer this to either Mr. Van Tiffelen or Mr. Maher. Could you help us with some of these questions?
I can field a little bit of it. I guess number one, you know, with regard to what happened, how it happened, and everything else, that's really not the subject of the meeting tonight. We're talking about whether or not the property should be rezoned, and it should be treated just as any other piece of property is. If someone feels they were wrong during the process, you know, certainly that's something they have to take up with the court system and the people that wronged them. See what else we have here. I think we had a pretty thorough rundown of who owned the properties, and the gentleman who spoke seems to know probably more than I do about the chronology on that. The property, as far as I know, and it was prior to my time, didn't have an appraisal. We have no purchaser for the property right now. The first step will be to get it rezoned. The second step will be to put it out for bid.
Get it appraised, I'm assuming. Something on that order, yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
I'm sure whoever purchases it'll want to have it appraised, yes.
okay. All right, commissioners, Ms. Van Tiffelen, anything you want to add to that?
No, just to reiterate, the reason the township bought the property was to get the stub street put in. We had put the developer of the subdivision at the north end of the site in touch with the church, as well as some potential owners that were looking at that property. We were just trying to facilitate getting the stub street in. If it was going to go residential, we wanted the London Bridge to go all the way down to 22 Mile like it was originally planned when it was a plat. So that was the motivation for buying the property. And like Pat said, I don't think that it's relevant to whether it's CF or R1.
You're right, okay. All right, commissioners, have anything else they want to add to this? Being none, at this point in time, I'll take motions, comments.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion, but I'm getting back to my agenda, so I have the correct information for me. I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of this parcel from CF to R1. That'd be permanent parcel 08224000041. This would be because of the recommendations by the planning staff, because of consistency with the surrounding areas, and because of consistency with the master plan. I would like to note that I might have reservations, but any reservations I would have about this parcel would be strictly to usage, not to rezoning, which is what we're discussing tonight. I think this is an appropriate parcel to go from CF to R1. So my motion be to recommend approval to the Township Board for those reasons.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Tuckfield to recommend approval to the Township Board to take this property from CF to R1. Support by Mr. Shudo. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion will pass. Okay. Item 7, old business. Mr. Maher, you got anything for us?
We have nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Item 8, public comments, non-agenda items. Nobody? Okay.
Oh, wait a minute, hold on. I think-
Oh, yep.
The Stub Street went in before there was any talk about selling the 15 other acres. The reason I know that, he contacted me first if I was interested. We were
Okay.
not interested. As I mentioned, it needed a lot of fill dirt and a lot of things, and what are you gonna do about 22 Mile Road, things like that. So that is not exactly how it was laid out. Then the church got contacted after starting with me to see if anybody would be interested in buying it. Why'd they buy it anyway?
You know, this is non-agenda items. We've already talked about this on the agenda.
Okay,
Anything else you want to add to anything?
yeah,
But this item we've already discussed.
thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Macomb Township Board of Trustees Liaison, Mr. Krasinski is not here. ZBA Liaison update?
No ZBA items this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Planning Department again?
We're all set at this point, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have one comment.
Yep.
I'd like to thank Mr. Van Tiffelen and the board for their water rate workshop. It was very informative. I didn't have a chance to attend it, but I did watch it, and Mr. Van Tiffelen, I think, answered, if not 90% of the questions that were asked. I mean, he was spot on, did a great job, and it was great to see the board let Mr. Van Tiffelen and Mr. Wangler run the meeting, and it was very informative, and I wanted to thank you guys for that.
Residents felt satisfied when they
I
left?
felt satisfied as a resident when the graphs and the things that they showed explained why our water rates are high and why our usage goes up when the red lines are above a certain point and the blue lines are fine, and
Yep.
it's
Good.
kind of like a thermometer.
Well, thank you, Jim. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, I just had a couple questions and comment to Patrick. Just had questions on two different developments. One, the development on Hall Road just east of the Dairy Queen. Is that a consent judgment? What's going up there? Is that an office center? I assumed it was since we haven't seen it.
It's called Castle Rock. It's a commercial plaza.
Okay.
And yeah, I think that was a consent judgment. I think the parcel's not conforming because of the right-of-way dedication, if I'm not
Okay.
I
mistaken.
think it was still part of the consent from the Dairy Queen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. I was wondering if we were planning, I noticed that we had a couple of meetings canceled. Are we leaving any updates to the sign ordinance for next year or for potentially a future planner? Do we have any updates we're planning on doing on that, or?
You know, my thoughts are at this point, I've probably got 1 or 2 meetings left. Not an adequate time to do something with that, so I plan on leaving it for your new planner.
Understood. Very good. And then just lastly, briefly, on our business tonight, I had some reservations with this particular rezoning, and I kind of struggled with it a little bit. I ended up deciding but all my struggles had very little to do with the question that was in front of us. But in the wider planning body, and this goes to sort of our master plan as we're going forward, I feel like parcels like this are things we can use to take advantage of being able to put in pocket parks and things. And we may not have the infrastructure built into our master plan, but I hope that that's something that we can talk about in our master plan process. And you know, it's not every day that we have a parcel of land in the south end that we semi have control over, and that doesn't mean we have to develop it into a full park. But I feel like when we have these types of opportunities, maybe there are things we can do. And I might not know all the things that are going on. They may be investigated, they may be looked into, but hopefully on the staff end, you guys can be mindful of it. I know it's one of my priorities when we go into the master plan process is trying to make sure that we talk about these opportunities as they happen. You know, one of the things as I look around the township that I feel bad about is all the subdivisions where we could have potentially done more if we had the groundwork laid out for bike paths or any number of those things, and that starts at the planning process and make sure the developers know a long time before they start. We obviously can't spring it on people last minute, so just something I noticed with it. I had some concerns with it. I think the rezoning request in itself was valid as I voted, but hopefully we can look at some of the perimeter issues going forward. So that was all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? Motion is adjourned.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Shudo,
Support.
support by Mr. Tuckfield. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.